Hey, I'm Daniel, and you're watching another episode of the FILMCRAZIEST Show. And on this episode, I was joined by the team for the new film, Scenes from an Empty Church. My guests today were the film's writer and director, Onur Tukel, as well as the three leads in the film, with Kevin Corrigan, Max Casella, and Thomas J. Ryan. The film is about a pair of priests in New York during the COVID-19 pandemic, who open their doors again to their community in order to bring them together, while they and a friend get over their own personal trauma. The film released today, July 2nd, in both theaters and on digital formats, and links to watch the film can be found below. Here is the team to introduce us. Cool. So this is the FILMCRAZIEST Show. Hey guys, I'm happy to have you here for Scenes from an Empty Church, and I would love to go around the Zoom room, I suppose, and if you guys can introduce yourselves, what you did on the film.
Max Casella, I played Paul. I guess we're going from left to right on the screen.
I guess our left to right.
Yeah, you're up, Onur.
Okay, I'm Onur Tukel. I'm the writer-director.
I'm Tom Ryan, and I played Father Frank?
Father James.
James.
Father James, yeah.
It's been a minute. I'm sorry, everybody. Father James. Really? Okay.
I'm Kevin Corrigan. I play Father Mackenzie, wiping his hands of the dirt as he walks from the grave.
Father Andrew, yep.
Father Andrew.
It has been a while since you guys filmed it, eh? In like June. Last
Yeah,
June.
it was, yeah.
Now that we get the priests' names right, I'd be curious to know, like, just start with an acting question for Thomas and Kevin. What was it like preparing to play a priest?
Would you like to answer that, Tom?
Well,
yeah.
my answer to that is that I went to Catholic boys' school and in high school, and I actually had a really positive experience with the teachers there, many of whom were priests. Some of them were intimidating, but some of them were really cool. And I always wondered what their backstory was, what was happening for them in their personal lives and so forth. And so I was excited to do it, and very excited to work in a church every day. It seemed like it was very, I don't know, a sort of appropriate place at that moment in time in New York. Kev?
What a wonderful answer. Everything Tom just said, the environment, getting to be in the church every day, it's a really nice place to be. Very contemplative, it's quiet, except when Onur's talking.
That's not very often, though. I don't really talk that much, so, but yeah, every now and then.
And yeah. It was also, what?
Kevin, you said you'd always wanted to play a priest, right? In your career?
Yeah, that's kind of a part I've always wanted to play as an actor, but I think for a period of time there was I wanted to, I thought it might be an interesting thing to do, be a priest. The thing about, the listening, just being a listener. I think, the great thing about going to Catholic school was, once in a while you met someone who was very thoughtful, very serious about what they were doing there. Just as far as communicating with people and listening. And then, listening, of course, is the most important part of being, for instance, a musician or an actor. So all of those things kind of play into it, into the, being attracted to playing such a part, to answer your question.
Okay. And it is pretty
Tom's answer was so much better.
No, you're good. And it is pretty
And
interesting
shorter.
That you're from the Bronx and you're playing this New York priest that's like such a big part of the community, right?
Yes. I was an altar boy, and I became an altar boy after watching The Exorcist. I was about 10 when I saw it, or 11.
You got scared into being an altar boy? You saw the devil's real?
Into the loving arms of the church. But I was going to become an altar boy anyway, I think, because a lot of my peers were altar boys, and it just seemed like a thing to do. But I was also frightened into it, honestly. I wanted to be closer to God, honestly. And but then I kind of discovered that there was what Scorsese called the pageantry of the church. The vestments that the priest wore and the ritual and the sort of deep mystery of the church. It was, you already get that as a parishioner going to mass, but to actually be in the show, to play a part in the mass, and to be there during the consecration, to be there playing a part in it. And I got to serve in a mass for, the guy must have been very important, because Cardinal Cook came up to the Bronx to perform the funeral mass for this guy up at St. Brendan's Church in the Bronx, and I was an altar boy. One of, I don't know, there might have been 6 of us. It was a big mass. There were 5 priests plus the Cardinal Cook. Remember in Hannah and Her Sisters when Diane Weiss tells Woody Allen, I feel like I'm dating Cardinal Cook. Does anybody?
Oh,
He's like legendary New York figure, religious figure, and I worked with him.
oh,
Pretty
that's
good,
awesome.
yeah.
It's a great story.
Gave me a medal.
That's why I tell people when I say I work with Kevin Corrigan, Tom's Jay Ryan.
Yeah. And I gave you guys
thing.
medals. Do you still have your medals?
No, I didn't get my medal.
No, I threw that out.
I'm still waiting for my medal.
Now, Max, I'd be curious to ask, what was it like for you, like playing just a character with so many demons as he's going on this kind of journey, like realizing his own mortality a bit?
Oh, it was easy. My mother just died. My wife had just thrown me out the house maybe a year or 2 before that. My father died the year before that. I've been sliding into alcoholism. I was pretty primed to do it. And in the middle of the pandemic, and then Onur calls me and gifts me with a job and to film in a beautiful church with 2 great actors, Kevin, Tom, and it was easy. I was just playing myself as I always do.
Did it hit a bit too close to home? And I'm sorry for your losses.
It was perfect. It was cathartic. It was therapeutic.
Okay, well, I'm glad that role could help in this time, right?
Well, no, I didn't need the role to help deal with my personal issues, but what was the lifesaver of all was just having a job during the pandemic, during the lockdown, right in the middle of the summer of 2020, and not just any job, a job with my dear friends. I love Onur's stuff. I'd do anything for Onur. And to be in a peaceful church. I love churches, even though I was raised by 2 communist atheists. So I never knew any of the stuff these guys are talking about. It's like foreign language. I've always loved churches. I used to just sit in them when I was a youngster, just sit in them and listen to Mozart and just chill out.
I feel like in a lot of ways, Max was kind of playing me. I don't know very little about Catholicism. I was raised in a Baptist town, but Paul kind of plays the character who's in between. He's asking a lot of questions. He's looking for meaning and stuff. So I feel like Max and I have a very close relationship. He's one of my favorite actors. So I thought Max would be great at this. And then he and I talked, and as we were rehearsing, I was like, I knew what Max was going through. I was like, Max, let's change some of the dialogue to fit what you're going through. And he was cool with that. So we altered a lot of the dialogue just based on, not a lot of it, but based on some of the things, the more personal things. The first conversation between him and Paul and Father Andrew, where Paul is talking about the things he's gone through when they're in the church, talking about the link between Judaism and Catholicism and New York dying and the resurrection of New York. A lot of that stuff, Max and I went back and forth and altered the dialogue to kind of fit what he was going through, so.
It's the stuff about what went wrong with Paul's marriage, that was trying to make it more truthful about what was going on, what just went happen, without going into details and stuff like that, just to make it more close to home for me.
And I definitely have a drinking problem. So that part is of Paul, that comes from me wrestling with that, I haven't been seeking help, but I drink more than I should, so I can't speak to Max about that, but I've seen him, take a nip or two of a little alcohol from time to time. We've but yeah. So, I think the whole movie for everybody was kind of personal because a lot of the fear, I think Tom and even Kevin spoke to this, that we were all going through some kind of low level stress. It's stressful when you make a movie anyway, but because of the pandemic, we were all feeling the stress of it. We were all scared about getting sick, but we, at the same time, we needed to make something, that's what actors do and artists do and filmmakers do. They take their dread and they put it into something. Film and the process is very therapeutic. So I think Kevin and Tom were able to use, I think, the fear they were experiencing to inform their characters. I think.
Well, many times in the work, you have to come in on the day, and if you're having stress outside, you have to find a way to focus on yourself in the right kind of way for the day. This project was so unique because whatever I was going through, I could just invite it in, just bring the fear into the scene, onto the screen. Nothing had to be rearranged or edited. If I was very worried about doing the film, so this is different person to person, but for me, I was very trepidatious and nervous. It was very early days in the pandemic, and I had fear, but my character obviously had fear. And you wouldn't be human if you didn't have some fear in that situation. So I just brought it in. And that's a great luxury, making a film.
Okay. And speaking about that fear, Onur, I read in your director's statement that you usually get pretty dark in your films. So I was curious just to ask what it was like kind of tackling the subject as kind of a more light at the end of the tunnel kind of aspect.
Yeah, it just felt like, the right thing to do. Like, everybody was experiencing a collective bleakness that felt redundant to sit there and say, well, let me make it worse. It's so easy. I think cynicism is necessary and it's fun and it's cathartic, but to mock things as we're all experiencing them just seemed very presumptuous. So for me, the opportunity to make a film, I was so grateful for it. And I was so grateful that three of my favorite actors, that I got a chance to work with them and put them in leading roles. I felt like as all this was materializing, and I was developing the script as I was talking to Kevin. I said, Kevin, if I write the script, will you be involved? He said, yes, if you write it and I like the script. That gave me a lot of heart to write something from a perspective of positivity. And then once we did that, for Max and Tom to get on board, it was just a very positive experience. And I tend to write from whatever's happening in my life. And even though things were bleak and bad, the idea of making a movie is a very hopeful prospect. You go into it with hoping the movie is going to be good, with great expectations. And long story short, it felt redundant, to make something negative when we were all experiencing such collective negativity. So it just, I don't know. I don't have a lot of control, I feel like, over what I write. I just kind of write whatever's there, and that's what came out. This movie about the soul and the body and the relationship between the two. When all of our bodies are separated, it seemed like a pretty fitting metaphor. Like Catholicism, flesh of Christ, soul of Christ, body of Christ. And here I have the holy trifecta of actors, Kevin Corrigan, Casella, Thomas J. Ryan. I joke that it's the holy trifecta, but to me it is. They are such great actors, and what they do in the movie is just, to me, so beautiful. And it transcends, I think, a good script. They transcend it and make it a great, great movie. And I'm just very grateful to all three of them. They're so great. And also, you see them, everyone knows their work. but you rarely see them in it's criminally, it's unfortunate, but you don't see them in leading roles often. And I think this is just a beautiful showcase for all three of them, you know? So how can you not be positive when you have these kind of actors? I'm not crying, I'm just sweating. Okay, Tom and Max and Kevin, I've got some sweat in my eye, you know, although I have cried, I've gotten teary eyed thinking about what we did. You know, we all felt very lucky, I think, while we were making the film. I think we talked about that. Like Kevin talks about how he thought the idea of not making a movie that, because I know, Tom, you had Broadway shows shut down. Maybe some of you all had projects that would close down. Like to not be able to work during this time, that was even more sad as the actual prospect of not being able to venture out, not be able to see your friends, the fact that people were dying. For amazing actors to have work stop or to not be able to work, I think this gave everyone a chance to work during a time where not a lot of people were working. And I think that was great. I'm rambling. I apologize. Yeah. So, yeah.
You're good.
So, yeah.
Now, reflecting on all of it, it's interesting that this is coming out at a time when New York is like alive again, and it's kind of everyone's getting back to normal in a way, if we can ever get back to normal. So what's that like for you guys, like doing this during a pandemic and now everyone can venture out again?
I'd like to say something about that.
Sure.
I mean, there was a certain response to the film that went something like this. That, I mean, this is what was sort of suggested to me over the past 6 months, and that it's a depressing film, or that it's a very serious story about something we know about. That we're living in that every day. We're in lockdown. Who wants to watch a movie about that? We need some escapism, and we need other kinds of stories being told right now to take our minds off of the pandemic. And it's like, that's what we did. That's what we thought was a good idea to you know, that's a good idea to us. That's a good idea for a movie. And so that's the movie we made. And now, you know, New York is reopening, or it's in this flush of reblossoming. And, you know, everyone who hated on New York, it was just a revenge fantasy. We're back and all this stuff. And in a way you could say, well, who wants to see a movie about COVID now that everything's reopened and everything's great supposedly again? Well, things aren't great. You know, look at India and Bangladesh, and it's worse there at the moment, at least as bad as it was here 1 year ago, or maybe not even a year ago. And people are still dying from it, by the way. And there's, you know, this Delta variant, and, you know, this movie speaks to, you know, to all of that stuff. And it's yeah, I remember thinking that worrying that, well, it's not going to be relevant, you know, once a year goes by, and, you know, Onur edits this thing, and, you know, by the time it comes out, the pandemic will be over, and it won't matter anymore. But it does matter. This film matters a great deal. And the whole thing about let's not talk about it, let's not make a movie about that, just is outrageous to me. Because I just heard something about Bangladesh. I have some next door neighbors who are from Bangladesh, and you know, a few months ago there was an outbreak in India, and I that's when they told me, you know, we're from Bangladesh, not India. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, it's Bangladesh, right? But now it's there, it's spread. So
did Kevin, I didn't interrupt, but did you ever see that movie Contagion, the Steven Soderbergh movie? Because that movie became, a lot of people were watching that movie during the pandemic. At least I saw it, and it was like, it became kind of popular again. It was made like 12 years ago, 2010, 2009. And it's what we were going through was happening with Contagion. Contagion was actually amplified. It was way worse in the movie. But I remember watching it and feeling cathartic, almost at ease when I was watching it, because things get terrible in that film and they unravel and they get worse. But they rein in the virus and they get it under control. And there is like an end to it. And you see that and you were reminded that things are going to get back to normal, So as I was watching it, I remember thinking this is terrifying, but at the same time, it's kind of hopeful. And I agree, Kevin. I think our movie's relevant. And I think that is the kind of film that that people should see right now. But keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt.
And also I take issue with the idea that this movie is depressing. I think it's hysterically funny.
Yeah.
And why don't people say that about it? Well, I'm saying it's funny. And I was going to watch this program of us talking about the movie. You're probably watching this because you've seen it or you plan on seeing it. And if you're hoping that this interview will be your opinion, whether you should just turn it on and have a laugh, because it's funny and it is serious too. The comedy and the drama, it goes from, it includes both. It goes from one tone to the other kind of seamlessly.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of another movie that's done it. Maybe Catch-22, where you're not sure what you're watching, whether you should be laughing or. It's a very relatable film. It's not as, I don't find it. Anyway.
Yeah.
I'd like to just add that to that. I think that's a great answer, Kevin. And I just would say, we can't control where people are now and where they are now is going to affect. We have no control over that. That may play to the movie's favor, or it may hurt whether people watch the movie. But the film exists. The film was made. The film speaks for itself. And the film will live. I have no doubt. Good work lives. And it doesn't need us promoting, in a sense, because it's like that was a traumatic moment in time. Whether people are ready to look at it right now, I don't know. If you look at films in the aftermath of World War II, they weren't really very successful in the moment. People know they didn't really want to go. Now we look at some of those films through a new lens. And that might be true here, but it might not. I don't know. I'm very proud of it. And when I look at it, it seems to speak for its moment better than anything else I've seen. I'm very deeply, deeply proud of that. I didn't do anything else during the pandemic. I didn't work anywhere else. That's the thing I did during the pandemic. And that's the greatest gift I've almost ever been given as an actor. So that speaks for itself.
Same, I concur.
Okay.
Well said.
Makes it happier, right? And it is, like Kevin was saying, it is pretty lively. It's pretty funny. So
come on, it's so witty. It's
really
so funny.
So I wanted to ask about like that scene where you guys share the screen with Craig Bierko, I think is how you would say it, as Carl the Sinner, I think was his character's name.
Yeah, great scene, isn't it?
How did you guys keep a straight face during that one? Because just his chuckling was like really great, I thought.
He's terrifying. In the moment, I can't speak for Kevin. He kept me on my toes. I didn't know which direction he was going in. And all I could think was stay here present with this guy, because he's surprising and weird. And yes, he's funny, but he's also had an undercurrent of danger that was very palpable. So that's what makes it funny. He's not trying to be funny, really. It's just funny because it's so dark and so real. That was my experience. Kevin, what about you?
I was off camera, so I didn't have to worry about laughing. I didn't have to worry about holding it in, rather. Yeah, it was frightening once you realized, where we're going with this scene, or where he's going. That was not original script. It was written kind of while we were shooting, or was it?
It was written late. It was written a few weeks before we were shooting the movie. It wasn't included in the original script, and we thought we should include it. We something that kind of mocked the hypocrisy of baptism and salvation, and how anybody could achieve salvation regardless of the sins they've committed. That felt like the right thing to do. As we were rehearsing, it felt like the right thing to write. And the funny thing is, when we were rehearsing it initially with Craig and Kevin and Tom, and I think Max, you may have been there when we were doing the rehearsal. The original version of the scene was much funnier. There were a lot of jokes, a lot of punchlines. I really tried to like ham it up, and I was desperate for the laugh. And all the actors, and I'm always very interactive with my script, but almost everybody said, listen, you should make this thing more dramatic, darker. Don't strip it from its humor. We should take this seriously. And they were completely right. It still comes off as very funny, but without the laughs, without the punchline, the humor is all in just the way he portrays it, And I remember Max, actually, you were on set, Max, and he was behind the camera, and Max, you were laughing. We were both getting a kick out of it. Like, there wasn't a lot of rehearsal time, so I didn't really know how Craig was going to play it, but he showed up. And he was there. He was in it. It was amazing. And just the way Tom and Kevin play off of him. I think the movie's got so many amazing scenes. I'm in love with the whole movie. Sometimes that's my favorite scene in the movie. Sometimes it's the scene where it's just Kevin and Paul, Father Andrew and Paul talking about Judaism. Sometimes it's Tom's beautiful confession, and then sometimes it's Max on the beach crying at the end. I just think the movie, it's just got so many rich, amazing performances and scenes, and I'm in love with all of it. And the sinner scene is really terrific. I'm really, really glad it's there. I think it's the only kind of horror scene. It's a horror scene in a way, like, because I feel like he is the most evil character I've ever written, and I don't think I'll ever write a character that evil again. And we still don't know the magnitude of his sins. I joke and hope I get to make a sequel. I'd like to make a trilogy. Kevin, were you going to say something?
No, the magnitude of his sins was a good sentence, I thought.
Oh yeah, even Craig told me. Craig said we don't need to hear him say what he says. The last thing he says in terms of admitting, he says we don't need that line. And I'm like, yes, we do. And just the way Craig says it, and after he says and confesses to the sin, this little smile that curls up on his face. Oh, it's so terrifying. And then Tom, cutting to Tom. Tom, you just have this, your lip trembles just a little bit, after he tells you this. It's just fantastic. I really want to do a trilogy of this movie. If this movie has success, I want to see Father Andrew and Father James exorcise the demon inside of the sinner. I want to see an exorcism movie for part 2. And then, of course, Paul will be part of this as well in some way. And then part 3 will be more about Paul and whatever his journeys are. And so I'd really like to see, I don't know, I'd have to convince Tom and Kevin and Max to do it, but I'd really like to see these characters live on. I'm in love with them. I just think they're all so beautiful and flawed and feisty and sad. I think when Max is crying on the beach at the end, I think that's ultimately what the movie's about. This kind of fear of the unknown, fear of death, not understanding what's happening or why, and at the end of the day, as stoic as we all may seem to be, I mean, I am Paul. I am just terrified I don't want to die. As miserable and sad as I am some days and how unfortunate I am, I know I'm very, very lucky. And at the end of the day, I just don't want to die. And I feel like that's what the pandemic was in a lot of ways, was saying, look, we're all faced with mortality. It's a real thing. I just lost my mother a few months ago. And before that, death was a very abstract thing to me. And now that it's very real, this movie speaks to me a lot more. The loss that Father James and Father Andrew, especially Father James, are going through, I feel like I can really connect with that loss now that my mother is gone, a year after we made the movie. But anyway, I'm just so grateful, and I feel so. And I keep saying that. So anyway, yeah.
No, sorry, voice crack. No, that was well said. So I'm gonna end it there. So, Onur Tukel, is that how you say your last name?
Yeah, Onur Tukel. That's great.
Okay, cool. So director, writer, editor, and then Thomas Jay Ryan, Max Casella, and Kevin Corrigan. Thank you guys for chatting with me about Scenes from an Empty Church on the Film Craziest Show, and it comes out July 2nd, I believe.
Yep, July 2nd, next this coming Friday. Yeah.
Awesome, cool. So look out for it then, and thank you guys for coming on.
Daniel,
thank you, Daniel.
Take care. Thanks, Daniel. Cool. Take care, everybody. Good seeing everyone.